Welcome to the third of these videos where I share ideas and techniques and inspiration to do with abstract art. This one is entitled Using Fodder to produce an abstract piece of contrasting colours and patterns. I sometimes don't know the difference between pattern and texture because sometimes artists use a 2D piece and talk about texture, whereas texture I tend to think of in terms of 3D. Anyway, what I've got here are some pieces that I've previously produced. I say produced, they're essentially me being a skinflint and not wanting to waste paint, or paper for that matter. And they're often old bits of paper, sometimes with patterns already on them. For example, this one's got some writing on for an audio script that I did at one time. These ones look like they're just blank pieces of paper, but they're always on the side of my art bench when I'm producing a piece. And any spare paint that I've got, whether it be on a brayer or a paintbrush or stencil or anything else, I'll just splonk it down, and over time it builds up in layers and sometimes becomes just a mess. But sometimes it produces some sometimes work in its own right. Sometimes there's bits of it that I think would be useful. So I'm going to be using those and incorporating them into this piece. But I'm going to start by just laying down some colour. And I'm going to be using the brayer. Sorry about knocking the camera stand there. So there's that size one. I might use this bigger one. And I might even use this small one. We'll see how that goes. I've got my usual tools, colours. Well, I will be using black. That one's oxide black. Just happens to be the first one I came to. I'll probably use a bit of Payne's grey as well. I love that colour. This is to produce a background that's going to be a contrast. I haven't tried this one much before, but I like the idea of using dioxazine purple. That's a Liquitex paint. So we'll start. Okay, so I'll run this bit at normal speed. This might be a suitable juncture to say I'm building the channel here, and if it's the first time I'm visiting, please do like and subscribe, usual stuff. Set the notification if you want to, and do share the channel with your friends who appreciate art or create art. What I'm doing here is applying acrylic paint, blobs of it, straight from the tube onto the mixed media paper. And what I'm going to do is use the brayer. You'll notice I'm just mixing the colours up here. There's a bit of ivory going on there. And I wanted to create a sort of mixture of greys, lighter colours. There's some dioxazine purple in there as well. Let's see how it pans out. You can see the dioxazine purple is pretty much dominating straight away. But what I like about the brayer is that you can get this coralling effect, which some people don't like, but I do. Plus, if you roll over it again, it begins to blend the colours. So I want a little bit of blending there, but also a bit of streaking as well. So I'm running this bit at normal speed. I'll probably up the speed of what I'm doing as time goes on. Here I'm applying a bit of water from a little spray canister, using the colour shaper to just go over what I've done, pull back the paint a bit. Some of the paint that comes off on the colour shaper I apply to other areas, provide a bit of coverage, or just to get a different effect. Smaller colour shaper here, going down the middle. I'm applying it quite vertically in places. If you put it at more of an angle, then you get a thicker layer of paint, which sometimes is good to do. I'm applying some more water because what I'm trying to do is get it to produce a bubbling effect, and I'm beginning to get it on this part. I'm not quite satisfied yet with what's being produced. I'll continue to try that. Just applying the colour shaper just to get some different textures. So I'm working fairly quickly here, trying not to think about it too much. Here I'm applying a bit of sgraffito, a few scrawps here and there. Works best where the paint's thickest, reveals the layers underneath. Being very random. Sometimes it's squiggles, sometimes it's straight lines. There, that should probably do for that bit. On to the next phase. Got a big pot of gesso here. Using a brush to apply it to the surface. Spritz it with a bit of water. And then use a cloth here to wipe. If you use a circular motion, it tends to just knock back the colour underneath and blend it, or you can streak it to the side as I'm doing here, just mixing the effects a bit. Where the paint underneath is still dry, is still wet I should say, then you find that the colours blend a bit more because they're mixing in. Applying the brayer again, using the gesso, this time allowing the gesso to be a bit harder in its application, and this is the effect I was looking for before. You can see as I scrape down vertically with a colour shaper or a cross, it produces this nice texture, this bubbling effect. So I'm glad I was able to achieve that. What I'm not showing you on here is as you see the transitions, such as there, then I'm doing a bit of hair drying. Now at this point I let the whole thing dry a bit, and while I was doing that I took my bits of fodder, and you can see here I've got these shapes that I've produced independently a long time ago, and I bring them out again and again. It was actually an idea from Judy Wood's channel, which I'll put a link to in the description. She's a great artist, a good share of ideas, and I just loved this one. I've turned the bits of fodder over so I can't actually see what I'm going to be outlining, but I'm going around these shapes with a pencil, just choosing some that I find interesting, trying to get as many as possible onto the same bit of paper. And the intention is that I'm going to cut these out, and I'm going to apply them to the surface to produce a collage. Speeding this next bit up a lot more of the same really, just with a separate sheet. I would like a bit of almost mindless exercise this. You go into a bit of a trance while doing it. This bit, not sure if I'm going to use this, but if I am, then I'll want it to have more torn edges to it. Right, next phase is to use this, it's a product you've maybe seen advertised. I'm not sure that I've got the right combination of blades. This is the basic blade which works on paper, and as long as the paper's reasonably thin it cuts well, but basically the blade rotates as you go around, and it's supposed to make it a bit easier to cut out. I do find I've got to apply a standard scalpel, that's what you call it, a blade, to go over the bits. But here you can see that the sort of thing I'm doing. It means you don't have to keep twisting the paper around, and you can get some curved edges using this tool. They're about £20 in English money. Here I am, I've got to sort of use the scalpel to sort of push them out. If you want to cut anything thicker with the other tool, you've got to get extra blades, and they cost more money. I'm not prepared to go down that road yet because, as I said at the beginning, I'm a bit of a skinflint. I only buy things if I really, really have to. So that's what it looks like once you flip it over. And I didn't bother filming, cutting all of the other bits out. You get the idea. By now, the main piece, the background, has dried. And what I'm using here are some Neocolor water-soluble wax crayons, which are good for mark making. I'm applying water, because using that you get the best effect. The wax starts to dissolve and it starts to spread and produce some interesting shapes. I've just selected a few colours here. This sort of cadmium yellow stroke ochre colour provides a nice little contrast. Just applying and drawing out lots of different shapes. Still very random, not trying to think of composition or what it's going to become. Just throwing things down and having fun, really. And speeding things up a lot more, because again, you're getting the idea of what's going on here. Applying some different shapes, circles, sometimes lines, different colours. Some of these will get obliterated, some will get obscured, some will get blended as time goes on. But again, using a different kind of mark making and having fun. You'll see in places where I apply a lot of water, the wax crayon really does dissolve and you can blend it across almost like paint. You use the edge of your finger like I'm doing here as well. Here I'm taking some Daily Rowner acrylic ink, white colour, adding a bit of water judiciously with the dropper, and then doing the old tipperoo on it. I'm not that big a fan of just leaving it as drips going vertically. I try to create a bit of variation, and I'm using one of these tools, which is actually a photography tool for blowing away fluff that you might get caught up in camera mechanisms, but I find it quite useful for spreading paint in a different way, and if you get it just right you get some nice, there we are, some spreading effects like that. So I go over that again and again, and once I think I've done it enough, then I'll let the whole thing dry. I'll speed this next bit up a lot because, again, you get the idea of what I'm doing. Just do this as much or as little as you want, really, until you're satisfied. I also like the splatter effect using the toothbrush. I haven't quite got enough paint there. You can see it produces this mottled white effect. And I'm applying it a lot here. I sometimes just use it a little bit. Here I'm just putting a frame around to see what it might begin to look like. And yeah, I'm quite satisfied with that. Put it vertically. No, not really. I'd need a smaller piece, which I have got, but I can't be bothered to get it from downstairs. Next comes what I consider to be an exciting bit, where I take my cutouts from before and just place them in different configurations. I often do a lot of procrastinating here, thinking what's best. That bit that I put in the centre almost looks like someone with a boot at the bottom, and I'm already thinking that might be a figure and act as a sort of focus. And I'm starting to think these other bits as well, rather than put them separately, what would happen if I sort of tucked one bit under another and produced new shapes? Yeah, I'm not really liking that bit. I'm maybe just going to put that to one side and not use it. So a lot of moving around here. There's another tucked bit. And you see that because I've cut it out randomly to different shapes, it produces something that you never originally intended. Happy accidents. Here I am gluing it in place using PVA glue, and I'll go over the top of it with matte medium gel. I'll just show you how I do maybe the first one of these. I use a brush to apply it first of all, and because it's fairly thin paper it starts to curl up a bit, and especially where the shape's gone thin it can be a little bit problematic like that, so you have to straighten it out. Watch it doesn't do that thing like you sometimes get sellotape doing, curling in on itself and sticking over, and you've got to try and unravel it. But there we are, sticking it down. Move that bit out of the way. Being a little bit gentle here. One thing I did do that's off screen is I took a picture with my phone of where I'd put these bits, because as you lift them off, particularly when they're tucked over and put next to each other, you sometimes forget what you did. which in one way doesn't matter because you just put it in again and get a new random shape. But in this particular case, I was beginning to think a bit more about composition. In fact, at this point as well, I did look at my whole list of possible titles. Sometimes the title only comes at the end. Sometimes it comes right at the beginning and acts as the inspiration. But on this one, it's going to come halfway through. I'll talk about that in a minute because I just want to mention I use this scraper just to smooth out any wrinkles. Some people put a paper down over the top or use a brayer. And here we go. Skipping ahead, that's all the pieces stuck down now. And I'm just pointing out a few possible shapes that that particular shape I'm saying there slopes sort of upwards from left to right, and the other one slopes the opposite way. And I've made a deliberate attempt not to just go bottom left to top right. It seems to be a tendency of mine, which you might think, well, that's okay, who cares? But I like to, mix things up a bit. This shape here looks a bit like a bird of some sort. I'm thinking it might be something like a jackdaw, even though it's a blue jackdaw. Again, I've got this figure here. It seems to be stooping over with its great big boot on the end, only one leg. I don't know, maybe did it lose its leg or it just never had one. Maybe it was born that way. Nice little patterning here with metallic blue. I remember using that on another painting. Here we've got, I use it as a stencil brush. So what I want to do now is apply a bit of a grunge stencil. So I'm using this one here and just sort of flipping it over because sometimes these things have a better side to use. If you use the wrong side, it tends to smudge it more, but this one seems to be the same both sides as far as I can tell, and it hasn't got a this way up sign on it. So just dabbing down with the stencil brush here, using, it's a dark blue, it's Prussian blue, a colour I really like. I think it will help it stand out a bit against the dioxazine purple colour and the Payne's grey that lies underneath. I'll speed up the next bit because I carried on doing this for quite a while. And just to mention before I go that thing about the titles, the one I got come to mind is that I've got 6 shapes here, and these are going to be 6 characters or 6 strangers. And it actually comes from a Bob Dylan song called A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, and one of the lines is 10,000 whispering strangers and no one listening. Well, there's not 10,000 on here, there's only 6. So I'm going to modify that a bit to say 6 strangers, 6 whispering strangers with nothing to say or no one listening, which seems quite apt. Why is no one listening? Perhaps because they're talking nonsense, or maybe they're speaking the truth and no one wants to listen. Okay, I'll speed the next bit up and join you once I've finished the stenciling. Having had a look at this, thinking that I don't want the stencil marks to be quite so strident everywhere. I think it just draws the attention away too much from the characters that I'm going to make more defined later on. But I'm just applying a bit of gesso here just to knock back the edges in certain places where I've applied the stencil. I do like that particular grungy stencil. It's quite geometric. Here I'm starting to go round the characters. Like I said, I want to make them more defined, so I'm going to use the Posca pen, white. This is the thin one. I'll alternate between the thin one and the thick one here. This is going to take quite a while, so I'll speed this bit up again and give you another bit of background music. You can see here, started to use the paintbrush just to define some areas. These bits I'm going to make into the teeth of the character that you can see down there. I've now picked up the black Posca pen, going to go around the white areas that I've done just to really make those characters stand out. Time for more music and a speed up, I think. So, slowing it down to real time, the grand reveal, the bit I like where you remove the masking tape from the outside. You sometimes lose a bit of what you've done at the edge, but that doesn't matter, it defines it. And I must say at this point I am very pleased about the way this has worked out. I can really see some different characters in there, makes me sort of wonder who they are, what they're saying, what their story is. This particular bit where I'm peeling off here, I've used an old bit of masking tape and it's not coming off too easily, so I may have to glue that down a little bit. But once this is off, I'll be able to show you some more close-ups of what I've produced, and you can have a look at yourselves, see what you think, what stories and characters you see, and what the picture is saying to you. I remember this was a bit difficult. I tried to apply my signature with the gel pen and it just wasn't taking, so I had to go over it again with various other pens, black and white. I eventually got there. And just to show you that sometimes fodder projects produce even more fodder, any spare paint this time around I put onto other bits of paper that I'd begun. So that one on the left is going to take a lot more doing. The one on the right is starting to come into something, I think. And this is the one I like the best. It's quite an old piece, but you can see the layers that have been produced. The last thing I did with this is to apply some lacquer just to fix it all in place. So let me know in the comments what you think, whether you've used fodder in the past and whether you've got any suggestions and ideas for how to create new textures and colours and compositions.